Mom, I need you to handle Christmas dinner this year. It'll be 18 people from Deshawn's family, and you know how amazing your cooking is. Tamika's voice floated through the phone speaker, casual and light, as if she were asking Lorraine Washington to water her plants while she was away. Lorraine, 74 years old, felt time freeze as she processed her daughter's words. 74 years of living, 42 years of marriage, 28 years as a widow, and now this. 18 people, Tamika. And why do I have to take care of everything? Lorraine asked, gripping the phone until her knuckles turned white. From the other end of the line, she heard Tamika sigh impatiently, like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Oh, Mama, because you have free time. We work all day. Besides, Deshawn's house is too small to host his entire family. Yours is perfect. It has that big dining room and spacious kitchen. And let's be honest, nobody makes sweet potato pie and collard greens like you do. Lorraine closed her eyes and leaned against her kitchen wall, the same kitchen where she had prepared thousands of meals for Tamika when she was little, where she had waited up when Tamika came home late from teenage parties, where she had cried silently after her husband Jerome's funeral. It was as if her daughter had completely forgotten who was the mother and who was the daughter. Tamika, honey, I'm not a caterer. I'm your mother. Please, Mama, don't be dramatic. It's just a family dinner. You can buy everything and I'll give you the money afterward. Deshawn already talked to his mom, Rochelle, and she's bringing the desserts. You just need to take care of the main course, side dishes, appetizers, and clean the house before and after. You know, the usual. The usual. Lorraine felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. When had it become normal for her to be the servant of her own family? When had she accepted being treated as if her time, her energy, her dignity were worth nothing? And Mama, one more thing. Deshawn's family is a bit particular about food. Nothing too spicy. Aunt Keisha can't eat gluten, Cousin Malik is vegetarian, and Deshawn's grandma only eats very well done meat. Oh, and we need some nice wine, but not too expensive because it adds up in the end. Lorraine remained silent, feeling each word from Tamika like a slap. It wasn't just the Christmas dinner. It was a lifetime of small humiliations that had accumulated like raindrops into a storm. It was the 18 people said so naturally, as if preparing food for 18 demanding strangers was as simple as boiling water for tea. And what are you going to do, Tamika, while I'm cooking for your husband's entire family? Oh, Mama, I'll be there helping, of course. I don't know. I'll set the table and serve the drinks. Deshawn will be busy tending to his family. You know how these family gatherings are. Lorraine felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't her heart. It was something deeper. It was her patience, her infinite capacity to say yes, her need to be the perfect mother who never caused problems. For 74 years, she had been the woman who solved everything, adapted to everything, who smiled even when her world was falling apart. Tamika, I have a question for you. When was the last time Deshawn and his family invited me to something? When was the last time they treated me like the grandmother of their future children and not as the free help? Mama, don't start that. They appreciate you very much. It's just, well, you know how Deshawn is with his things. He's shy. Shy? Deshawn, who had never had trouble borrowing money when he needed to fix his car. Deshawn, who had never been shy about letting Lorraine pay for dinner when the four of them went out together. Deshawn, who had never been shy about using her house as a free hotel when his parents visited from out of town. All right, Tamika, I understand perfectly. Lorraine's voice had changed. It no longer sounded like the usual understanding and available mother. It sounded cold, calculated, different. Tamika seemed to notice because her tone became sweeter, more manipulative. That means yes, Mama. You'll take care of everything. I promise it's going to be a beautiful Christmas, and everyone will remember how amazing you are at cooking. Lorraine looked out her kitchen window at the garden she had cared for over decades. The roses she had planted when Tamika was a child, the rusty swing where she had pushed her granddaughter, who now lived in another city and barely called. Her whole world had become small, reduced to being useful to others. Tamika, my love, I have news for you. Your husband and his relatives are coming for Christmas? Perfect. Then I'm going on a trip and you can take care of everyone because I'm not a babysitter, much less an employee. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Lorraine could almost hear her daughter's panicked thoughts. She imagined Tamika's pale face, her eyes wide with horror at the possibility of having to organize a dinner for 18 demanding people herself. What? Mama, you can't be serious. A trip? Where? With whom? Mama, this is ridiculous. Everything is already planned. Everything is planned by you, Tamika, without asking me if I wanted to be part of those plans. Lorraine hung up the phone with trembling hands and stared at the receiver as if it were a strange object. For the first time in decades, she had said no. For the first time in her life, she had set boundaries. And the feeling was as terrifying as it was liberating. What would you do if your own daughter treated you like free help? Would you have the courage to say no? The real question is, what happens when Tamika realizes her mother is serious about leaving? She walked slowly toward her living room, where photographs of a lifetime watched her from the shelves. There was Tamika at 5 years old in her pink polka dot dress, smiling toothlessly in the garden. There was her late husband, Jerome, handsome and young in his army uniform before life hit them with bills, illnesses, and disappointments. There were photos of Tamika's first Christmases, when Lorraine believed that being a mother was all she needed to be happy. When had all this begun? When had she stopped being Lorraine, the woman with her own dreams and desires, to become simply Tamika's mama? She remembered the day Jerome died 28 years ago. Tamika was barely 17 years old, and Lorraine promised herself that she would be both father and mother, that her daughter would never lack anything. And she kept that promise. She worked double shifts at the hospital until her hands became rough and her shoulders stooped. She sold her wedding jewelry to pay for Tamika's college. She gave up the possibility of falling in love again because Tamika needed stability. She swallowed her loneliness for 28 years because her daughter was the most important thing. When Tamika married Deshawn 5 years ago, Lorraine thought she could finally live a little for herself, that her daughter, now adult and established, would no longer need so much from her. How naive she had been. The first favor came 2 months after the wedding. Mama, can you lend us $2,500 for the down payment on Deshawn's car? We'll pay you back next month. Next month never came, but more favors did. Mama, can you watch the house while we're on a late honeymoon in Cancun? Mama, can you host Deshawn's parents when they visit? Our apartment is too small, and Lorraine always said yes, always smiled, always available. She walked to her bedroom and opened her nightstand drawer, where she kept her important documents. There was the notebook where she recorded all family expenses. For years, she had kept meticulous records, not out of distrust, but out of habit as a working woman who knew the value of every cent. The numbers hit her like a punch to the stomach. In the last 5 years, she had spent over $18,000 on Tamika and Deshawn. $18,000 that had come from her pension, from her lifelong savings, from the money she had saved for her own medical expenses when she got older. Deshawn's birthday dinner, $450. Tamika's car repair, $850. Christmas shopping for the whole family, $1,100. Flights for Tamika and Deshawn to visit the in-laws, $700. Tamika's rent when Deshawn lost his job, $1,400 for 3 months. And never, not once, had they asked how she was, if she needed anything, if she had enough money for her medications, or to fix the leaky roof that she had been ignoring for 2 years because she preferred to prioritize Tamika's emergencies. She sat on the edge of her bed and for the first time in years allowed herself to cry. She didn't cry out of sadness. She cried out of rage. Rage at Tamika for taking her for granted. Rage at Deshawn for treating her like free help. But most of all, rage at herself for letting this happen. The phone rang. It was Tamika again. "Mama, please." "You can't do this to me. I already told Deshawn you were going to cook. He already invited his whole family. What am I going to do now? I don't even know how to cook for so many people." "Learn," Lorraine replied with a calm she didn't know she possessed. "Mama, this is absurd. Cancel that ridiculous trip. Where are you going to go alone? With what money? Let's be realistic. You can't travel alone at your age, at her age." As if being 74 had automatically turned her into an invalid who needed permission to make her own decisions. As if being a grandmother forced her to forever give up being a woman with her own desires. "Tamika, I have enough money to travel. The same money I've been spending on you for years." "What are you talking about? We've never asked you for money." The lie was so blatant that Lorraine felt nauseous. Had Tamika really forgotten all the loans she never repaid? Or had she simply decided they didn't count because they came from her mother? "Tamika, I have all the receipts, all the proof. Every cent I've spent on you for 5 years is documented." Silence. Then Tamika's voice, smaller, more insecure. "Mama, that's different. We're family. Families help each other." "You're right, my love. Families help each other. When was the last time you helped me?" More silence. Lorraine knew Tamika was desperately doing a mental inventory, trying to remember some gesture of generosity toward her mother. She wouldn't find it because it didn't exist. "I'm always here for you, Mama. I always call you. You call me when you need something. There's a difference." The truth hung in the air like an accusation. Lorraine got up and walked to her window, looking at the street where she had lived for 35 years. The same street where she had raised Tamika, where she had mourned Jerome's death, where she had grown old waiting for someone to treat her with the respect she deserved. "Tomorrow, I'm going to the travel agency," she finally said, "and you're going to have to figure it out yourself." That night, Lorraine couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at her bedroom ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of her house, the hum of the old refrigerator, the persistent drip from the bathroom she had never fixed because there was always something more urgent to pay for, the creak of the old timbers settling with the years. At 3 o'clock in the morning, she got up and walked to the kitchen. She brewed a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind she used to make Tamika when she was little and had nightmares. How ironic that now it was she who had nightmares. But her nightmares were real and had names. They were called ingratitude, emotional abuse, and the terrible feeling of having wasted 28 years of her life being the person everyone needed, but no one valued. Lorraine has made her decision, but will she really go through with it? What happens when a mother finally puts herself first after decades of sacrifice? The journey to freedom has only just begun. She sat at the kitchen table with her steaming cup and began to remember, not the sweet memories she had been feeding for years, but the others, the ones she had buried deep because they hurt too much. She remembered the first time Tamika had made her feel small. It was 3 years ago at her neighbor's baby shower. Tamika had arrived late, as always, and when someone commented on how elegant Lorraine looked in her new dress, Tamika had said, "Oh yes, Mama bought new clothes. I hope she didn't spend too much. You know how old people are with money. Old people." As if being old was synonymous with being irresponsible. As if her 74 years of experience working and managing money meant nothing compared to Tamika's 30 years living from favor to favor. She remembered the day Deshawn had eaten at her house for the first time when he had just started dating Tamika. Lorraine had cooked for hours, fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, cornbread, homemade peach cobbler. Deshawn had eaten without looking up from his plate, without a thank you or a "this is delicious." In the end, he had audibly burped and said, "It's all right, but my Mama Rochelle's mac and cheese is better." Tamika had laughed. Her own daughter had laughed at the insult to her mother. She remembered all the Christmases when she had cooked for 10, 12, 15 people from Deshawn's family while they sat in her living room watching television and criticizing everything. The house was too cold, the music too loud, the decorations too simple, and Tamika never defended her. Never. She remembered the day she had to go to the emergency room because she had deeply cut her hand while cooking for Deshawn's birthday. Tamika had arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, not because she had been busy, but because she had been at the nail salon. "Oh, Mama, was all that drama necessary? It's just a few stitches, just a few stitches." As if her mother's pain was always just something insignificant. She remembered when she had sold Jerome's wedding ring, the only valuable keepsake she had of her late husband, to lend Tamika $3,500 when Deshawn had lost his job. Tamika had promised to pay her back in 3 months. That had been 2 years ago. She remembered the time she had been sick with the flu for a week, so ill she could barely get out of bed, and Tamika hadn't come to see her even once. But the same day she felt better, Tamika had called her to ask her to water the plants at her apartment because they were going on a romantic weekend getaway. And she remembered, with a clarity that surprised her, the exact moment when she had stopped being a person to become a function. It had been the day of Aunt Vanessa's funeral, Jerome's sister. Lorraine had been crying because she terribly missed her sister-in-law, with whom she had shared so many years of confidences and laughs. Tamika had approached, but not to comfort her. She had approached to whisper in her ear, "Mama, stop crying so much. People will think you're overreacting. Besides, I need you to go early tomorrow to pick up my dress from the dry cleaner. I need you to go. Not could you or would you mind. I need you to go, as one tells an employee." Her tea had grown cold in her hands, but Lorraine hadn't noticed. She was too busy processing 28 years of small deaths, small humiliations, moments when she had swallowed her dignity to maintain family peace. The phone rang again. It was 4 a.m. "Mama, are you awake?" "I can't sleep thinking about this. Deshawn is furious with me. He says, 'How am I going to sort out dinner? His parents already bought their plane tickets. You can't do this to me.'" Tamika's voice sounded desperate, but Lorraine no longer felt the automatic urge to rescue her. For the first time in her life, her daughter's problems sounded like problems her daughter had created and that her daughter could solve. "Tamika, it's 4 a.m. "I know, but I just can't sleep." "Mama, please, let's be reasonable. We can find a solution. What if I pay for all the ingredients? What if I help you more in the kitchen?" As if the problem was the amount of help and not the fundamental fact that they had planned to use her house, her time, her energy, and her money without even asking if she agreed. Tamika, the solution is very simple. Have dinner at your apartment. But our place is too small. Then rent a hall. That costs money. And my time, my house, and my work don't cost money, do they? Silence. A long, heavy silence that held 28 years of unspoken truths. Mama, I don't know what's wrong with you lately. You're being very strange, very selfish. Selfish. The word every woman who dares to set boundaries hears sooner or later. The word used to make women feel guilty for having their own needs. Tamika, I'm hanging up now, and don't call me again until you've found a solution that doesn't involve me. Mama! Lorraine hung up the phone and unplugged it from the wall. The silence that followed was the most beautiful she had heard in years. The silence of freedom is settling in, but the battle isn't over. When Lorraine wakes up tomorrow, will she have the strength to follow through with her plan? And what will happen when she walks into that travel agency?
The next morning, Lorraine woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. At first, she thought it was anxiety, but after a few minutes, she realized it was something she hadn't felt in decades: freedom. For the first time in 28 years, she didn't have to wonder what Tamika needed, what problem she had to solve, what sacrifice she had to make. She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite lavender blouse, the one Tamika always criticized, saying it made her look too old. She combed her hair in front of the mirror, and for the first time in years, truly looked at herself, not to look for wrinkles or gray hairs to conceal, but to recognize herself. There stood Lorraine Washington, 74 years old, widow, mother, but above all, a woman. She walked toward downtown Detroit with firm steps. Every block she covered felt like a declaration of independence. The travel agency was on Woodward Avenue, between the pharmacy where she bought her medications and the bakery where she had bought bread every day for 35 years. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" The young woman behind the counter had a genuine smile, not the forced smile Lorraine had learned to recognize in people who saw her only as someone's grandmother. "I want to take a trip for Christmas." "How wonderful! Do you have a destination in mind? Are you traveling with family?" "I'm traveling alone, and I want to go as far away from here as possible." The agent, whose name was Jasmine Collins, according to her badge, showed no surprise or pity. She simply opened her computer and began to show her options. "We have some beautiful packages for solo travelers. Are you interested in beaches, mountains, historic cities?" Lorraine looked at the photographs Jasmine showed her: white sand beaches in Jamaica, ancient ruins in Peru, cobblestone streets in Portugal. For years she had only seen these places in magazines she flipped through in the doctor's waiting room, thinking they were dreams for other people, for people who had the right to be happy. "How much money are you planning to spend?" Jasmine asked gently. Lorraine thought of the $18,000 she had documented in her notebook. $18,000 she had given without thinking, without asking for anything in return, believing that love was bought with sacrifice. "I have $6,000, she said. And as she said it, she realized it was the first time in years she was talking about her money, not the money she had to set aside for Tamika's emergencies. Jasmine smiled more broadly. "With $6,000, we can do something incredible. How about a tour of Portugal and Morocco? 3 weeks visiting Lisbon, Porto, Marrakech, Casablanca. Hotels with history, meals included, English-speaking guides. It's perfect for someone who wants to rediscover themselves."
Rediscover herself. The word resonated in Lorraine's chest like a bell. When was the last time she had done something just to rediscover herself? I'm interested. When would it depart? We have a departure on December 18th. You would return on January 8th. Exactly during the Christmas holidays. Exactly when Tamika expected her to be cooking for 18 strangers in her own house. The irony was so perfect that Lorraine almost laughed. Do you need to think about it? Jasmine asked. No, Lorraine replied without hesitation. I want to book that trip right now. As Jasmine prepared the documents, Lorraine felt a mixture of terror and euphoria. It was the most impulsive decision she had ever made, but also the one that made the most sense. For the first time, she was choosing her own happiness over the expectations of others. I need a copy of your passport and a credit card for the deposit, Jasmine said. Lorraine took her passport from her purse. It was valid because she had renewed it last year with the secret hope of someday using it. Tamika had scoffed when she found out. Why are you renewing your passport, Mama? Where are you going to go? To Portugal and Morocco, Lorraine thought with a smile. I'm going to Portugal and Morocco. When she left the travel agency with her ticket in hand, she felt like a different woman. It wasn't just the trip. It was what the trip represented, the decision to live for herself. Her cell phone rang. It was a message from Tamika. Mama, Deshawn says, if you don't cancel that ridiculous trip, he's going to tell his whole family you're selfish and ruined Christmas. Is that what you want? Lorraine read the message twice. The first time with the old instinct of panic and guilt. The second time with a new cold clarity. Deshawn, who had never worked more than 6 months in a row. Deshawn, who had lived in her house for 3 months without paying rent. Deshawn, who ate her food, used her electricity, her water, her internet, and now had the audacity to call her selfish. She typed a clear reply. Tell Deshawn he can tell his family whatever he wants. I'll be in Africa and Europe, so I won't hear him. The reply came immediately. Africa? Europe? Are you crazy? With what money? With my money, Lorraine wrote, and then after a moment's thought, she added, the same money I've been spending on you for years. Her phone started ringing immediately. Tamika was calling her. Lorraine looked at the screen, saw her daughter's name, and for the first time in her life, decided not to answer. She turned off the phone and put it in her purse. She had more important things to do than listen to reproaches and manipulations. She had to buy luggage. She had to check what clothes to take to North Africa in December. She had to start living the life she had been postponing for 74 years. Lorraine has bought her ticket to freedom, but Tamika isn't giving up without a fight. What happens when a desperate daughter realizes her mother is serious? And who will knock on Lorraine's door next? For the next 3 days, Lorraine kept her phone off, not because she was afraid of Tamika's calls, but because she had discovered something wonderful. Silence. The silence of not having to explain her decisions to anyone. The silence of not having to justify why she deserved to be happy. She spent those days preparing for her trip like a teenager preparing for her first date. She bought a new suitcase, burgundy red, elegant, and practical. She bought clothes she had never dared to wear. A stylish tan coat that made her look sophisticated, brightly colored scarves, comfortable but pretty shoes for walking on European and African streets. At the downtown bookstore, she bought a guide to Portugal and Morocco and spent hours studying the maps, marking the places she wanted to visit. The Geronimos Monastery in Lisbon, where she would see centuries-old architecture, the colorful tiles of Porto that seemed straight out of a dream, the bustling souks of Marrakech, where she would smell exotic spices, the blue streets of Chefchaouen, where she would have mint tea while watching life pass by. For the first time in decades, She had something of her own to plan, something that did not involve the well-being of anyone but herself. On the fourth day, she decided to turn on her phone. She had 52 missed calls from Tamika, 15 voice messages, and 28 text messages. She read them all with a calm that surprised herself. "Mama, answer the phone. Mama, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Deshawn says if you don't change your mind, we're going to have to find another solution. Mama, Deshawn's family already bought their plane tickets. You can't ruin Christmas for so many people. I'm very disappointed in you. I never thought you'd be so selfish. Mama, please. I need you." The messages followed the same pattern. First anger, then emotional blackmail, then victimhood. It was like reading a manual on psychological manipulation. The saddest thing was that for years, that manual had worked perfectly on her, but not anymore. She dialed the number of her friend Celestine Parker, the only person she knew who had always spoken to her honestly, even when that honesty hurt. "Lorraine, where have you been? Tamika called me yesterday asking if I knew where you were. She sounded hysterical. Cece, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me." They met at the corner cafe, the same one where they had met once a week for the past 10 years. Cece, at 76, was still the direct and unfiltered woman she had been all her life. She had been widowed the same year as Lorraine, but had taken a completely different path. She had learned to drive, taken pottery classes, traveled with tour groups, and even had a couple of discreet romances. "You look different," was the first thing Cece said when she saw her. "You look more like yourself." Lorraine told her everything. Tamika's call, the demand to organize dinner for 18 people, her refusal, the trip to Portugal and Morocco she had booked. Cece listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally until Lorraine finished. "And what do you think?" Lorraine asked. "Am I being selfish?" Cece laughed, a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. "Oh, Lorraine, do you know how many years I've been waiting for you to have this conversation with yourself?" "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? I've seen how Tamika treats you for years. I've seen how you let yourself be treated. And every time I've tried to tell you something, you defend her." "But she's my daughter, Cece. But she's going through a difficult time." "But when you're a mother..." Sound familiar? Lorraine felt her cheeks flush. Yes, it sounded familiar. She had used those same excuses for years to justify the unjustifiable. "Cece, do you think I'm a bad mother for going on a trip for Christmas?" "I think you're a woman who is finally learning the difference between being a good mother and being a useful mother. A good mother teaches her children to be independent, responsible, grateful. A useful mother does everything for her children until they forget how to do things for themselves." Cece's words felt like raindrops on dry ground. Lorraine had been a useful mother, not a good mother. She had solved all of Tamika's problems until Tamika had lost the ability to solve her own problems. She had given so much unconditional love that Tamika had learned to take it for granted. But isn't a mother supposed to always be available for her children? "Lorraine, Tamika is 35 years old. She's not a child. She's an adult woman who is married and has her own home. If at 35 she can't organize a Christmas dinner without her mama doing everything, the problem isn't you. The problem is you never taught her she could do it herself. But after Jerome died, I wanted to do everything for her. And that was fine when she was 17. But you kept being everything to her when she was 22 and 27 and 32. And now she believes that's your job, that you exist to solve her problems." Lorraine remained silent, processing her friend's words. It was painful to recognize that perhaps she had loved Tamika in the wrong way, that by trying to protect her from everything, she had made her incapable of protecting herself. Cece, what do I do if she never speaks to me again? Then you'll discover if she really loves you or if she just loves what you do for her. The truth is out, and Lorraine is starting to see clearly. But is she ready for what comes next? Because someone unexpected is about to show up at her door, and this confrontation will change everything. The truth was simple and terrible. For years, Lorraine had confused being necessary with being loved. She had believed that as long as Tamika needed her, she would love her. But true love doesn't come with a list of requirements. True love isn't conditioned on usefulness. Do you know what's the saddest thing about all this? Cece asked. Tamika doesn't even really know who you are. She only knows the version of you who solves problems and gives money. She doesn't know Lorraine, the woman, the one who has her own dreams and deserves respect. For the first time in days, Lorraine felt like crying, but not out of sadness, out of relief. Someone saw her. Someone understood that she was more than a maternal function. Go to Africa and Europe, Cece said, taking her hand. Go and rediscover who you are when you're not being someone else's mama. The next day, Lorraine decided it was time to confront the situation directly. She couldn't go to Morocco with the weight of an undeclared war. She needed to talk to Tamika face to face one last time to set boundaries definitively. She turned on her phone and dialed her daughter's number. Mama, finally, where have you been? I've been so worried. Deshawn says you probably hit your head, and that's why you're acting so weird. There it was again. The false concern immediately followed by an explanation that made
look like a senile old woman. Deshawn, of course, had a medical theory about her behavior. Deshawn, who had never shown genuine concern for her well-being. Tamika, I need you to come to my house. We need to talk. Talk about what? About canceling that ridiculous trip and sorting out Christmas dinner like adults? Come at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and come alone. Alone? Why? Deshawn also wants to talk to you. He says you need to understand the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation. According to Deshawn, the man who had lived in her house for 3 months without paying rent now wanted to explain reality to her. Tamika, either you come alone or don't come at all. I'm not negotiating this. Tamika entered with a look of annoyance, like a teenager who had been unfairly punished. She sat on the sofa with her arms crossed, radiating resentment. Mama, this has to stop. You're acting like a spoiled child. The whole family is talking about you. What family, Tamika? Deshawn's family who has never invited me to anything? The family who only knows me as the woman who cooks for free for their gatherings? That's not true. They appreciate you very much. When was the last time any of them asked me how I was? When was the last time they brought me a gift, or invited me to eat, or just called me to chat? Tamika opened her mouth to answer, but remained silent. Both knew the answer. Never. Tamika, for 5 years I've been your husband's family's unpaid help, and for 5 years you've been okay with that. That's not true. We always treat you... What, Tamika? You've always treated me with respect? Always considered my feelings? Always valued my time? Lorraine got up and went for her expense notebook. She placed it on the coffee table, opened to the page where she had made the total. $18,000. That's what I've spent on you in 5 years. Money that came from my pension, from my savings, from the money I should be saving for my old age. Tamika looked at the numbers with wide eyes. Mama, we never asked you to keep track. You're right. You never asked me to keep track, nor did you ask my permission before spending my money. You just assumed it was available to you. But we're family. Families help each other. Tell me, Tamika, how have you helped me in these 5 years? Silence. A silence so profound you could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen. I'm always here when you need me. When have I needed you, Tamika? Give me an example. More silence. Tamika was desperately searching her memory for a time when she had given instead of received. When you were sick, when I was sick with the flu last year, you didn't come to see me even once. I found out later you had been at the spa with Deshawn's friends. Tamika's cheeks turned red. It's just, I didn't know you were that bad. I sent you 3 messages saying I felt very sick. You never replied. Mama, you can't nitpick every little thing. They're not little things, Tamika. They're 28 years of little things that accumulated into this, into a relationship where I give everything and you receive everything. And the day I decide to set boundaries, I'm the bad one. Tamika began to cry. Not the genuine cry of someone who understands the harm they've caused, but the manipulative cry of someone who knows tears have worked before. Mama, you can't leave for Christmas. You can't leave me alone with this problem. Tamika, you created this problem. You told Deshawn's family I was going to cook without asking me. You assumed my house, my time, and my money were at your disposal. This isn't my problem to solve. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to cook for so many people. Learn. Hire a catering service. Order food. There are 100 solutions that don't involve me. That costs money. And my work doesn't cost money, does it? Lorraine has drawn a line in the sand, but Tamika isn't done fighting. What happens when desperation turns to anger? The confrontation is about to reach its breaking point.
Tamika wiped her tears and changed tactics. Mama, if you do this, Deshawn is going to be very upset with me. He says if his family feels unwelcome, it'll be my fault. Then maybe it's time Deshawn learns to solve his own family problems instead of delegating them to his mother-in-law. You can't talk about my husband like that. I can and I will. Deshawn is a 37-year-old man who has never organized a family gathering in his life because he's always had women do it for him. First his mama, Rochelle, now me. When is he going to grow up? Tamika stood up from the sofa in a fury. I see what's happening. You're jealous because I'm not just yours anymore. You're jealous of Deshawn. The accusation was so absurd that Lorraine almost laughed. Tamika, I'm not jealous of Deshawn. I'm tired of being his free help. You know what, Mama? Go on your stupid trip. We'll sort this out without you. And when you come back and feel lonely, don't come crying. Tamika stormed out, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. Lorraine stood in the middle of her living room, breathing deeply. For the first time in 28 years, she had said exactly what she thought, and the world hadn't ended. The following days passed in a strange calm. Lorraine expected to feel guilty. She expected doubts, remorse, the little voice inside telling her she had been too harsh with Tamika. But that voice never came. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: peace. She woke up each morning without the anxiety of wondering what problem of Tamika's she would have to solve that day. She ate breakfast in silence, reading the newspaper from cover to cover, something she hadn't done in years because she was always rushing to solve some family emergency. She took unhurried walks in the park, observing details she had ignored for years. The autumn colors on the trees, elderly couples feeding the ducks, children playing with a freedom she had forgotten existed. One afternoon, while organizing her clothes for the trip, the doorbell rang. She expected it to be Tamika, perhaps coming to apologize, perhaps coming to make one last manipulative attempt. But when she opened the door, she found Rochelle, Deshawn's mother. Rochelle was a 70-year-old woman, elegant and cold, who had always treated Lorraine with distant courtesy. In 5 years of knowing her, they had never had a conversation that lasted more than 10 minutes. "Lorraine, sorry to come without warning, but we need to talk." "Of course, Rochelle. Come in." Rochelle entered and sat on the sofa with the rigid posture of someone who had come to perform an unpleasant mission. "Lorraine, Tamika told me about the situation, about your decision to go on a trip for Christmas." "Yes, I'm going to Portugal and Morocco. It's something I've wanted to do for years. I understand you want to travel, but don't you think the timing is inappropriate? We already have everything planned. My family already bought their plane tickets." Lorraine studied Rochelle's face. There was no malice in her words, but there was that automatic assumption that others' plans were more important than her own. "Rochelle, can I ask you something? In these 5 years, how many times has your family invited me to something?" Rochelle blinked. She clearly didn't expect that question. "Well, we've always appreciated you opening your home for family gatherings." "That's not what I asked. I asked how many times you've invited me to something, to your house, to a restaurant, to a celebration where I was the guest and not the hostess." The silence stretched. Rochelle looked at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. "Lorraine, we always thought you enjoyed being the hostess. You're such a good cook, and your house is so welcoming. Rochelle, for 5 years, I've cooked for your family every Christmas, every birthday, every special occasion. I've spent thousands of dollars on food, decorations, gifts. I've cleaned my house before and after every gathering. I've washed mountains of dishes. And in 5 years, no one in your family has genuinely thanked me. But Lorraine, we always. Last year at Christmas dinner, your sister Keisha criticized my sweet potato pie, saying it was too sweet. Your brother-in-law, Terrence, complained there wasn't enough beer. Your son, Deshawn, fell asleep on my sofa while I washed the dishes. Is that appreciation, Rochelle?" Rochelle blushed. She clearly knew that everything Lorraine said was true, but she had never thought about it from the hostess's perspective. "Lorraine, I hadn't realized." "Of course you hadn't realized, because for 5 years all of you have seen me as part of the furniture at family gatherings. The woman who cooks, cleans, and pays, but who doesn't have her own feelings." "That's not true." "We—" "Rochelle, tell me something. Do you know my favorite color? Do you know what kind of music I like? Do you know if I have hobbies, dreams, interests that aren't cooking for your family?" Rochelle looked at her with wide eyes, clearly realizing she knew absolutely nothing about Lorraine as a person. "I hadn't thought, exactly." "You hadn't thought, because for your family, I'm not a person. I'm a function." Rochelle remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different, smaller. "What can we do to fix this?" "Nothing, Rochelle. You can't fix 5 years of disrespect with an apology, and I don't want you to fix it anymore. But Christmas dinner. Christmas dinner can be at a restaurant, at your house, at Tamika's apartment, or anywhere that isn't mine." Rochelle came to change Lorraine's mind, but instead got a dose of truth. Will this confrontation lead to understanding, or has Lorraine burned all her bridges? And what revelation is coming next? "For 5 years, you have taken for granted that my house was available for your gatherings. This year, you will learn to make other plans. I know we've made mistakes, but don't you think cutting all contact is extreme?" "I'm not cutting all contact. I'm setting boundaries. I'm telling you that I'm no longer going to be your family's unpaid help." Rochelle stood up to leave, but before reaching the door, she turned around. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course."
Have you ever been happy doing all these things for us?" The question hit Lorraine like a punch to the stomach, not because it was cruel, but because it was genuine, and the answer was devastatingly honest. "No, Rochelle, I haven't been happy. I've been so busy being useful that I forgot how to be happy." Rochelle nodded slowly, as if finally understanding something important. "I hope you find that happiness on your trip." After Rochelle left, Lorraine sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea. For the first time, someone from Deshawn's family had recognized that she had a right to be happy. It was a small step, but it was something. She looked at the calendar on the wall. 5 days until her flight. 5 days to leave behind 28 years of being the woman who solved others' problems and start being the woman who lived her own life. The phone rang. It was Cece. "How's everything, Lorraine?" "I think I'm finally learning the difference between being needed and being respected." "And how does that feel?" Lorraine smiled. A genuine smile that no one could see, but that could be felt through the phone. "It feels like freedom." The day before her flight, Lorraine woke up with a feeling of anticipation she hadn't felt since she was a child, waiting for Christmas. She had everything ready, her suitcases carefully packed, her documents organized in a special folder, the perfect clothes for every occasion she had imagined. But more important than all that, she had something she had lost decades ago: hope. She bathed calmly, chose her favorite dress, the coral color Tamika always criticized, saying it made her look too flashy, and put on makeup in front of the mirror, not to look younger or to hide wrinkles, but to celebrate the woman she had rediscovered. Every line on her face told a story, and for the first time in years, she was proud of that story. As she ate her last breakfast at home, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat, thinking it might be Tamika coming to make amends. But when she opened the door, she found something completely unexpected. An older gentleman, elegant, with flowers in his hands. "Mrs. Lorraine Washington?" "Yes, that's me." "My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm Jasmine's father, the travel agent who organized your trip to Portugal and Morocco." Lorraine looked at him confused. Why would Jasmine's father be at her door? "Jasmine told me about you," Marcus continued with a warm smile. "She told me you're a brave woman who's going to travel alone to Europe and Africa for the first time. And well, I'm also planning the same trip, the same dates, almost the same itinerary." Lorraine felt her cheeks flush. And I was wondering if you'd like some company." "Not for romance or anything pushy," he quickly clarified, noticing the surprised expression on her face. "Just to have someone to share a meal with once in a while. Someone to take your picture when you're in front of the blue streets of Chef Choen."
It was so unexpected, so outside everything she had imagined for her trip, that Lorraine didn't know what to say immediately. For months, she had visualized this trip as her declaration of independence, her moment of chosen solitude. But there was this man, Marcus, offering her something she hadn't considered: company without obligations. "I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. Jasmine showed me a picture of you when you were at the agency. Not to invade your privacy," he hastened to explain, "but because I had told her I hoped to meet interesting people on the trip. She told me you had a smile that showed strength and sadness at the same time. That description intrigued me." Lorraine truly looked at Marcus for the first time. He was probably 77, with neatly combed silver hair, kind eyes behind elegant glasses, and a posture that spoke of dignity without arrogance. He was wearing a navy blue sweater and well-pressed trousers. He wasn't handsome in the traditional way, but there was something about him that radiated calm and respect. "Can I ask why you're traveling alone?" "My wife died 3 years ago. Heart attack." During the last months of her illness, I promised her that if she left before me, I wouldn't stay home feeling sorry for myself. I promised her I would travel, that I would see places, that I would live for both of us." His voice softened. "This is my first big trip without her." Lorraine felt an immediate connection to his story. Both were escaping versions of themselves they no longer wanted to be. Both were looking to rediscover themselves in distant places. "And what do you hope to find in Morocco and Portugal?" Marcus smiled. "I hope to find the man I was before I became just Patricia's husband. I hope to remember what I liked to do when I wasn't taking care of someone else." The words resonated in Lorraine's heart like bells. It was exactly what she had been feeling, but hadn't known how to express. A mysterious stranger has appeared on Lorraine's doorstep, offering companionship without strings attached. Will she accept? And what will this chance encounter mean for her journey to freedom? "Marcus, I have to be honest with you. This trip is very important to me. It's the first time in 28 years I'm doing something completely for myself. I don't want to compromise it with romantic expectations." "Oh, Mrs. Lorraine," he interrupted gently. "I don't want complications either. I just want the possibility of sharing an intelligent conversation once in a while and having someone tell me if I have food in my teeth after eating pastel de nata in Lisbon." Lorraine laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised herself. It had been so long since she had laughed like that, without reservations, without worrying about how it sounded or if it was appropriate. "You know what, Marcus? I think I'd like that company." "Seriously?" "Seriously, but with one condition. Tell me. Each of us pays our own expenses. No old-fashioned chivalry where the man feels obligated to pay for everything. I have my own money and I want to use it." Marcus smiled more broadly. "Mrs. Lorraine, I think we're going to get along very well." He gave her the flowers, white and yellow roses, simple and beautiful, and left, not without first giving her his card with his phone number and the details of his hotel in Lisbon. After he left, Lorraine stood with the flowers in her hands, feeling like a teenager. Not because Marcus was a romantic interest, it was still too soon to think about that, but because someone had seen something more in her than a useful mother or an available grandmother. Someone had seen an interesting woman. She put the flowers in a vase and placed them on the kitchen table. Tomorrow she would be on a plane to Lisbon, and for the first time in decades, she didn't know exactly what to expect. That uncertainty that once would have terrified her now excited her. The phone rang. It was Tamika. "Mama, your flight is tomorrow, right?" "Yes, tomorrow." There was a long pause. "Mama, I don't want you to leave angry with me." "I'm not leaving angry, Tamika. I'm leaving free. Can we talk when you get back?" "We can talk when you're ready to truly listen." Another pause. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, Tamika, but I'm no longer going to confuse love with unlimited availability." After hanging up, Lorraine prepared her last dinner at home before the trip. Nothing elaborate, just a simple soup and a salad. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow she would be dining in Lisbon. For the first time in 28 years, she had something that was completely hers, a future full of possibilities. 3 weeks later, Lorraine was sitting on a small terrace overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Porto, with a cup of coffee that tasted exactly as she had dreamed it would. The late afternoon Portuguese sun caressed her face as she wrote in a new journal she had bought in Lisbon, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. "Day 21 in Europe and Africa," she wrote in careful script. "Today I understood something important. Happiness is not a prize you receive after years of sacrifice. Happiness is a choice you make every day. Marcus approached with 2 ice creams, a lemon one for her and a chocolate one for him. During the 3 weeks, they had developed an easy and comfortable friendship. He was a perfect travel companion, cultured without being pretentious, funny without being a clown, attentive without being intrusive. They had walked together through the Geronimos monastery, gotten lost together in the souks of Marrakesh. They had laughed together when he tried to speak Arabic with a Portuguese accent and ended up asking for shoes instead of tea. If the code seemed malicious, Claude refuses to work on it or answer questions about it. "Writing your memoirs?" Marcus asked, sitting in the chair next to her. "Writing my new story," Lorraine replied. "The one that starts at 74. Her phone had rung several times during the trip, messages from Tamika, some desperate, others furious, others manipulative. The first few days she had read them all, feeling pangs of guilt, but gradually she had developed a new perspective. Tamika's problems were no longer emergencies she had to solve. They were lessons Tamika had to learn. The last message she had read, sent 2 days ago, was different. "Mama, we had to cancel Christmas dinner. Deshawn and I had a big fight about who was going to take care of everything. In the end, we decided we weren't ready to organize." "Something so big. His parents are disappointed with us, not with you. I think I understand a little better why you left. I hope you're doing well." Lorraine had read that message 3 times. She felt no triumph or satisfaction, just a quiet confirmation that she had made the right decision. Tamika was learning, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, that actions have consequences and that there wouldn't always be someone else to solve her problems. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That for 74 years, I believed my worth as a person depended on how useful I was to others. I believed love was earned by being indispensable. And now I know that true love doesn't have to be earned. It either exists or it doesn't. And people who truly love you don't disappear when you stop being useful." Marcus nodded. During the 3 weeks, they had shared many deep conversations. He had told her about the years he spent caring for Patricia, how he had gradually lost his individual identity in the process of being the perfect husband. She had told him about 28 years of being the perfect mother, until she realized that perfection had made her invisible as a person. Lorraine is discovering herself in Portugal, but what awaits her back home? Will Tamika truly change, or is this just the beginning of a longer journey? The answer might surprise you. "Do you know what's the strangest thing?" Lorraine said. "During this entire trip, I haven't cooked a single meal for anyone else, and I don't miss it. I thought I would miss it, but I don't." "What do you miss?" "I miss the version of myself that existed before I became a maternal function. The woman who read books for pleasure, who had her own opinions about movies, who dreamed of traveling. That woman was asleep for 28 years, but she wasn't dead." The sun began to set over the Atlantic, painting the sky with colors that had no name. Tomorrow would be her last day in Europe before returning home. But home no longer sounded like a prison. It sounded like a place where she could continue to be the woman she had rediscovered on this trip. "Marcus, can I confess something to you?" "Of course. When I was young, before I got married, I wanted to be an art teacher. I never told anyone because it seemed like a silly dream. After I got married, after Tamika was born, after Jerome died, there were always reasons to postpone that dream. And now I think 74 years is not too late to be who I always wanted to be." Marcus smiled. "You know what? I have a confession too. I always wanted to learn to play the saxophone. Patricia used to say we were too old to learn new things. What do you plan to do about it? I think I'm going to buy a saxophone, they laughed together. The laughter of two people who had discovered that life doesn't end when you turn 70, that perhaps in some strange way it's just beginning. That night, Lorraine stayed awake in her hotel room, looking out the window at the lights of Porto. Tomorrow she would return home, but not as the same woman who had left. She would return as Lorraine Washington, not as Tamika's mother or Deshawn's former help. She would return as a woman who had learned that saying no wasn't selfishness, it was survival. Her phone vibrated, a message from Cece. "How's the new Lorraine?" She replied. The new Lorraine is learning that it's never too late to start a new life. The next day on the plane back, as she watched Europe disappear beneath the clouds, Lorraine wrote in her journal, "Today I don't need permission to live. Today I know that respect is not begged for. It is demanded. Today I understand that freedom is not doing what you want, but not doing what you don't want. And tomorrow, when I land at home, I will begin the rest of my life." She closed the journal and leaned back in her seat. For the first time in 74 years, the future belonged entirely to her. It wasn't revenge. It was liberation, and it felt exactly like flying. 6 months after returning from Europe, Lorraine sat in her new art studio with hands stained with acrylic paint and a heart lighter than it had been in decades. She never thought that at 75, she would be learning to mix colors and discovering that she had a natural talent for painting landscapes. The house felt different now. It was no longer a place where she awaited desperate calls or unexpected visits asking for favors. It was her sanctuary, her space where every object was where she wanted it to be, and every decision was hers. The silence no longer frightened her. It embraced her. Tamika and she talked now, but differently. At first it was difficult. There were tears, reproaches, mutual accusations. But something changed when Lorraine stopped defending herself and simply maintained her boundaries. Tamika had to learn to relate to her as a person, not as a resource. She was still learning, but there was progress. She asked Lorraine how she was before telling her problems. She invited her to lunch without expecting her to pay the bill. These were small changes, but significant. Deshawn was still Deshawn, but he was no longer Lorraine's problem. Tamika was slowly learning that her husband's problems were her husband's responsibility, not her mother's. It had been a costly lesson for her, but a necessary one. Marcus visited her once a week. They drank tea, shared stories from their classes. He did indeed buy his saxophone and was learning to play "What a Wonderful World." And sometimes they went to the movies, like two friends who enjoyed each other's company without complicated expectations. Lorraine didn't know if someday it would be something more. And for the first time in her life, that uncertainty felt beautiful instead of distressing. She had learned that self-love is not selfishness. It is emotional survival. For years, she confused sacrifice with love, thinking that the more she gave, the more she would be loved. Now she understood that true love blossoms when both people respect each other enough to maintain their individuality. Her bank account had grown. When you stop being the family bank, it's incredible how much money you save. She'd used some of those savings to remodel her house, for her painting classes, for small luxuries she used to consider unnecessary. A monthly massage, new books, fresh flowers for her table. Things that made every day feel like a celebration of being alive. The most surprising thing had been discovering that she wasn't invisible. She had simply stopped seeing herself. When she started to value herself, others also began to do so. Her neighbors greeted her differently. The butcher asked her about her paintings. The librarian saved art books especially for her. 6 months later, Lorraine has built a new life. But has she truly found peace, or is there one more lesson to learn? The final chapter of her transformation is about to unfold. Lorraine had learned that setting boundaries doesn't destroy relationships. It either improves them or eliminates them, and both outcomes are good. Relationships that improve become more authentic. Those that are eliminated probably weren't worth keeping. Some days she felt sadness for the lost years, for the woman she was who believed herself indispensable, when in reality she was interchangeable. But that sadness no longer paralyzed her. She accepted it, embraced it, and then let it go. The past taught her. The present belonged to her. She looked at her hands as she cleaned her paintbrushes. Hands that had cooked thousands of meals for people who took them for granted. Hands that cleaned messes she didn't make. Hands that signed checks for others' dreams. Now, these same hands created art, wrote their own thoughts, applauded personal achievements. The woman who boarded that plane to Lisbon was a retired caregiver who had forgotten her own name. The woman who returned was Lorraine Washington, artist, traveler, friend, a complete woman who didn't need anyone's approval to validate her existence. One afternoon in late spring, as Lorraine was painting a landscape of the Portuguese coast from memory, the doorbell rang. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to find Tamika standing there. But this time she looked different. Her eyes were red, but not from manipulative tears. These were genuine tears. "Mama, can we talk?" Lorraine stepped aside and let her daughter in. They sat in the living room, and for a long moment neither spoke. "I've been seeing a therapist," Tamika finally said. "After Christmas, after everything that happened, Deshawn and I almost got divorced. We had a huge fight because I blamed him for everything, and he blamed me. And then I realized I was blaming everyone except myself." Lorraine remained quiet, letting her daughter speak. "The therapist asked me to write down all the times I'd asked you for help in the past 5 years. Mama, when I saw that list, I was ashamed. I was so ashamed." Tamika's voice broke. "I took advantage of you. I treated you like you were supposed to fix everything for me, and I never even said thank you." "No, you didn't," Lorraine said softly but without anger. "I keep thinking about that Christmas. How I just assumed you'd cook for 18 people. How I didn't even ask if you wanted to. How I called you selfish when you were the least selfish person I knew." Tamika wiped her eyes. "Mama, I'm not here to ask for forgiveness because I don't know if I deserve it. I'm here to tell you that I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry." Lorraine felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the manipulative daughter who cried to get her way. This was a woman taking responsibility for her actions. "Tamika, I appreciate you saying that. I really do. I know I can't take back those years. I know I can't repay all that money, though I'm working on a payment plan with Deshawn. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better."
I'm learning to be independent. I'm learning to solve my own problems. That's all I ever wanted, Lorraine said. Not for you to never need me, but for you to respect that I'm a person with my own life, my own dreams, my own limits. I see that now. And Mama, your paintings, they're beautiful. I had no idea you were so talented. Lorraine smiled. Neither did I, because I never gave myself the chance to find out. They talked for 2 more hours, really talked, not with Tamika asking for favors or Lorraine solving problems, but as 2 adults learning to rebuild a relationship on mutual respect. Before Tamika left, she hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mama, not for what you can do for me, but for who you are." Those words, more than any apology, healed something deep inside Lorraine. After Tamika left, Lorraine stood in her studio, looking at her paintings. She had one of the Lisbon skyline, another of the blue streets of Chef Chaouen, and a new one she was working on, a portrait of herself as a young woman, the woman who had dreamed of being an art teacher. Her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Lorraine, I have a proposal for you. There's a community art exhibition next month, and they're looking for local artists. I think you should submit your work." "Marcus, I've only been painting for 6 months." "And in 6 months, you've created more beauty than some people create in a lifetime. You deserve to share it with the world." She looked at her paintings again. For decades, she had hidden her light, believing that her role was to help others shine. But now she understood that her light was meant to be seen too. "You know what? I think I will." That evening, Lorraine sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the Detroit sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, exhausted, taken for granted, invisible in her own life. And she thought about the woman she was now, free, creative, respected, visible. She still woke up every morning without knowing exactly what the day would hold. But now that uncertainty was exciting, not terrifying, because she finally learned the most important lesson of all, that she deserved to write her own story, and that it's never too late to change the ending. The phone buzzed with a text from Cece. "Dinner at my place next week? Just us ladies. No obligations, no drama, just good food and better conversation." Lorraine smiled and typed back, "I'll bring the wine, the good kind." She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, feeling the evening breeze on her face. For the first time in 75 years, she was exactly where she wanted to be, in her own life, living on her own terms, answerable only to herself. It wasn't the ending she had expected when she hung up that phone call from Tamika almost a year ago. It was better. It was freedom. It was peace. It was the life she had always deserved, but had been too afraid to claim. And it was only the beginning. What would you do in Lorraine's situation? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider supporting us so we can bring you more stories like this. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life.